car, and that was my only clue that they took a right turn. After that, I glanced across to my companion behind the wheel and quietly grumbled. I swung open the door, leaped out, and bang. My skull slammed into the pavement. Hi there. I am Chris Batts. The Antelope Valley is where my family and I am originally from. It's about 2 hours south of LA. One thing my grandma told me when I was 5 years old was that my dad left because he wasn't interested in having a family. Even though my mom didn't want a child, she ended up giving birth to me. According to my grandma, after 6 months or so, she was apparently well on her way to a career in modeling, but her plans took a slight detour when she became pregnant. She carried the kid to term. Whatever it is that happens to women after giving birth, I don't know what it was. She abandoned me in a garbage in a nearby neighborhood when I was just 6 months old and went her separate way. A nearby resident was taking out the trash when they heard the sound of a baby sobbing. After picking me up, they recognized my mom and me. Somebody has to have asked, "Why is this baby in the trash?" My neighbor took me in and then contacted my grandma to inform her, "I am holding your grandson here, and I will not allow him to go anywhere until you come." My grandmother took me in when I was 6 months old and cared for me until I was around 3.5 or 4 years old. My grandma spent a year in the hospital after suffering a nervous breakdown. I spent some time in the middle of those two extremes. I wound up staying with my mom's least favorite sister in the end. As you might expect, this was a very terrible home. The fact that they treated me so badly is ironic, considering how often we attended church, on Sundays, Wednesdays, and other occasions. Among their many sacred Bible texts, they cited the following. The Bible says, "You spare the rod, you spoil the child." They saw that as a green light to beat me any time they wanted, thinking it would get us into heaven. Going 7 days without losing was a big deal for me when I was younger. My instructors would often wonder if I was in trouble at home when I came to school with cuts and bruises. My fear was that if I said yes, I would receive more money, so I was afraid to say no. God, was I scared of him? Oh my goodness, I was frightened. This was a divine being who stated, "I'm going to kill you and you're going to burn. You're going to be tortured for life, and your soul won't get any rest." In spite of this, my family and I were regularly attending this church, where I was thinking deeply about religion. Feeling like I had nothing to offer made me pretty messed up already. No one else seemed willing or able to help me, so I made the decision to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Life lessons had to begin with my learning them on my own through observation and experience. By the time I was 15 years old, I felt like an adult and thought, "Oh, I'm ready for life. You don't have to tell me anything." I would be free to return at my leisure and remain out until the sun came up. After that, I began to lag behind academically. I didn't make it through high school, so I had to settle for watching from the bleachers during graduation. I lagged behind my friends in life's advancement after high school. Unlike me, they had people rooting for their success and providing encouragement along the way. At the same time that they were getting their first homes, apartments, and automobiles, I was making monthly trips to the county building to request $200 for the bus. I was too ashamed to ask for assistance. As a child, I suffered from depression due to this humiliation. My sadness was so severe that I stopped caring. I drank daily, tried prescription cough syrup, and took every medicine I could find. After I became disinterested in that, I resumed my drinking habits. My personality was never addictive. I simply became bored easily and sought solace in other pursuits. Keep in mind that the reason my life was so difficult was that I could never rely on anyone in my family or circle of acquaintances. The relatives I did know were distant and uninterested in me because I was too ashamed to ask for assistance. Therefore, I made the decision to leave. Every train that went by the station was timed by me. All right, I'm going to choose this time and this day to jump in front of a train, I thought to myself as I remained there, monitoring and taking notes on the schedules. Things will unfold as they will. Nothing could be worse than this very moment, so I'm not going to worry about it. I left while still in the middle of an argument with a friend who was one of the only people who understood what I was going through. They must have tracked me in some way. I was about 10 or 15 feet from the rails when the honk shattered my well-laid plans. I need to think of something entirely new now. Yes, I was thinking that too. "Ah, you messed up my plan," I said when she came to my rescue. In the midst of this mayhem, my mom summoned me, and I remember thinking, what the hell? How cruel that she should phone me just when I'm contemplating suicide. We haven't spoken in years. I can't even begin to fathom how long. It was possible that she was calling to express her apologies, which would have altered my perspective significantly. "I asked your grandma how you got my number, and she told me you were looking for me," she countered. "She claimed that your grandmother had given her the phone to you, that you had called to inquire about me, and that I had called to inform you that I do not want you. You're not my son," with which she ended the call. Thinking, you were never really here, I glanced at my phone after saying, "Okay." I lowered the window and threw the phone out the window. I glanced over at my pal in the driver's seat as they continued on after making a right turn. That's all I know. In my head, I whispered, "This." After opening the door, I leaped out, and my skull slammed against the concrete. "I think this hurts," I thought to myself, since I couldn't be sure with certainty whether it hurt or not. "Oh, if I could just go home," I thought to myself. While I struggled to rise to my feet, an inner voice kept saying, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Someone continued telling me that, so I mustered all my strength to stand up and pull myself up. Everything seemed to be falling apart, and it was a terribly damaging sensation. I saw a lifeless body on the ground and thought, "That's my body." Nah, I told myself, it was only my imagination. Now I'm just going to head home. Everything was in slow motion, different hues, and I took approximately 3 steps. How could this happen? Is the question that first comes to mind. This is the strongest emotion you will ever feel. I got it. I simply knew. It had to have been God. It was so intense that I couldn't even begin to describe it. It happened constantly, following each phrase and sentence. My many inquiries were addressed precisely in the sequence in which they had previously occurred to me. "Who are you?" was going through my head. "Allow me to reacquaint you with myself." "A divine being, I am." The answer is yes, I exist. I am the giver of angels, thus yes, they exist. "May I meet with them?" I politely declined because I do not believe in angels. I was thinking, I just don't believe in that. It's for TV. A woman, seemingly a prostitute, is shown wandering on what appears to be a projector screen. As she passes, God declares, "I love her." Afterwards, you behold a man with a briefcase and a suit, and the Almighty declares, "I love him." You look up and see a stoner riding a skateboard, and God says, "I love him." My interpretation of his words was, "You think you're not good enough, but you are because I love everybody." He concludes by saying, "I will go to the end of the world so that everyone is with me." It occurred to me, oh, he'll literally go to the end of the earth for us just so we can be with him because he loves us like that. My question was, what am I supposed to do when I go back to Earth so people don't think I'm crazy? He advises, "Go and tell everyone that I love them." Rather than seeing him, I felt him kneel down on one knee and then embrace me. I felt so secure in the hug that I didn't want to release my grip. I remember thinking, oh my God, I am so unworthy to be here when I first encountered the source. I am not flawless, so please get me out of here. Permit me to go get flawless. Something like, "Please don't release me from this embrace," followed. It was a new experience for me to be cared for. I was certainly unaccustomed to someone truly and completely caring about me. It seems like a man to me, doesn't it? His dominance was incredibly masculine, like that of the most macho man alive. However, his care and the embrace he gave were well above anything a lady could have imagined. In a way, it's neither here nor there. I just refer to it as source because of that. Just because I say it doesn't mean I genuinely mean him or her. Here we are at the part where I am actually flying. In my vision, a swarm of angels swooping across the sky is depicted. 2 of them stood out to me. I knew them by name. It was as if I'd known them forever. They felt so familiar. I think I'm seeing angels, not God, but these celestial beings nonetheless. As I gaze at you at this precise moment, I perceive everything around me in the same way. Looking at the one on my left, I could almost make out a beetle's face. It was like staring at the sun. The brightness was so intense that I couldn't get a good look at his face. I turned my attention to the one on the right. It seemed the most human-like. His features resemble those of a human, and he wears blue trousers, brown sandals, a flannel shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and bushy brown hair. While many have drawn parallels to the Brawny Man, I find myself thinking more along the lines of Dan Connor from Rosian. He points out, "You have so much to do for so many people." I simply said, "I do." All they say is, "Look down." So I looked down and saw my friend's body, my own, as well as the ambulance's. There was an overwhelming need for me to return to Earth. His voice was one of severe frustration as he asked, "Are you sure you want to go?" He was standing on my left side. It seems he was more furious about my life circumstances than he was at me. I could have screamed, "No way. I'm leaving. I'm not going back," at that moment, but I had an overwhelming sense of duty and desire to return for some reason. It seemed like a tiny moment passed between me saying, "Okay, I'll go back," and really doing so. After being in the hospital for 2 days, I finally stir. "We thought you were dead. We didn't think you were coming back." They proclaimed me a miracle, and that was all I can recall. According to them, I had multiple episodes of bleeding, but there was nothing to worry about because I had already passed away. On the day of my official release from the hospital, I was being carried to the waiting vehicle in a wheelchair because I was completely paralyzed and unable to move or speak. Everything was perfect, but it appeared different as I gazed up at the sky, which included the mountain, the sun, the horizon, and a clear sky. Something wonderful, like a God that cares about us and doesn't pass judgment, had to be out there, I thought to myself. At that moment, I realized that God is the true God. From then on, I had no fear of dying. At that point, the tide turned. I had an overwhelming need to know the truth, so I began searching Google for everything and everything related to religion, the Bible, and the books that were omitted from the Bible. Why were these books left out of the Bible? I wanted to know a lot of things. Their words beckoned to me. I combed through a mountain of material in search of the truth, comparing it to what I could believe in. My outlook on mortality shifted, and I even made some professional adjustments as a result. Working at the mall, clothes stores, and all sorts of other places was a real challenge for me. I felt a stronger connection to God among children with special needs than I did with the general population, so I began volunteering with them. In my opinion, special education students lack some of the general education opportunities are often offered to students, but they are very close to one another spiritually. Therefore, I preferred to hang out with connected youth. Many people do not go through what I experienced, yet suicide is still a genuine thing. I fear I would have been just another wandering spirit if my past hadn't prepared me. I was fortunate enough to return and share with those who are contemplating suicide the message that there is love in the world and from a higher power. All it takes is for you to speak up. There is a person who will lend you a hand. Like the typical suicidal person, I was too ashamed to bring it up in conversation. In fact, that's usually when people act on their thoughts and feelings rather than discuss them. My point is that you shouldn't feel ashamed since there is someone who cares. No matter what you're going through, I often tell people that changing their thoughts can improve their lives, their self-esteem, and all that follows. To experience is, in my opinion, life's ultimate goal. I believe that making mistakes is a necessary part of growing as individuals. At some point in your life, you will reach a point where you will be able to use the lessons you've gained from those mistakes to your next